Hello, this is World Business Report from the BBC World Service, where we bring you the latest in money, marketing, manufacturing, and yes, much, much more. Please review us, rate us, share us wherever you can. BBC podcasts are supported by advertising.
Everyone likes shopping online, but searching for coupon codes is kinda a bummer. So make saving online a breeze with Capital One Shopping. Capital One Shopping is a free tool that instantly searches for available coupon codes and automatically applies them at checkout. Just download Capital One Shopping to your computer and let it do the work for you. So easy, and you don't even need a Capital One card to use it. Capital One Shopping. It's kind of genius. What's in your wallet? Savings and available coupons vary.
Hello, welcome. This is the BBC's World Business Report, today with Fergus Nichol. And in a moment, our main headline: US senators have agreed to extend the country's debt ceiling for 2 months after the Republicans dropped their opposition to the increase. Welcome, this is World Business Report. If you were with us at the end of September, you'd have heard us talking about 3 intertwined economic issues that were at the heart of the latest arguments on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. The first was a looming government shutdown. That seemed to be solved. It was at least postponed for another couple of months. The second involved a federal government debt. Well, that came to a head today. To keep paying for crucial aspects of the federal budget, the debt limit needed to be lifted. Amazingly, given the almost constant friction in Washington, bipartisan agreement has been achieved on this as well. Though this issue too will be back soon enough, as the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer conceded.
We have reached agreement to extend the debt ceiling through early December, and it's our hope that we can get this done as soon as today. I yield the floor.
Early December being the operative words. We'll get to the third strand in a moment. That's the Biden administration's plans for a $4 trillion or so package of infrastructure and social measures. But is this a cause for celebration? 2 deals in around a week. Bipartisanship run riot. Lauren Fader has been covering the debates for the Financial Times in Washington.
I think what we're seeing here is what we've seen Congress do time and time again, and that's kicking the can down the road. So they are celebrating these deals because in the very short term, they've averted crises. They've avoided a government shutdown, which would have led to hundreds of thousands of federal employees being out of work. And now it looks like in a matter of a couple of hours, there should be a vote on the Senate floor that will avoid this catastrophic default that everyone, investors, companies, foreign policy experts have all been warning would be disastrous, not only for the U.S. economy, but for the global economy, were the government to run out of money. But it is a stopgap measure. As you say, this is going to make sure that the coffers are filled until December, and we'll probably be reaching a pressure point again in the run-up to Christmas on this one.
To get a bipartisan agreement of any kind, somebody has to give and somebody has to get. Do we know who?
Sure. So, I think we have seen true compromise here in the sense that both sides have given a little. In the case of the Democrats, originally they wanted to tie government funding to the debt ceiling. Then they wanted to make sure that Republicans cleared the path for them to raise the debt ceiling over a kind of longer time horizon. Ultimately, Chuck Schumer, the Senate's top Democrat, has come to this agreement with Mitch McConnell, his Republican counterpart, to accept this very short-term deal. Now, on the other side of the ledger, when it comes to McConnell and the Republicans, he has conceded as well because for months he's been saying he won't sign on to a debt ceiling increase of really any kind. And obviously he's doing that here and now for at least a couple more months. And, some of his members of his own party have pushed back on this a bit, said that he gave too much. But from the, leader's point of view, he clearly made a calculation that this was the, not only economically, but he's always got his politician hat on, the politically savvy thing to do here.
Are both sides already, as we speak, preparing for the next round in early December, thinking, what could we give if we have to? What should we try to get?
Oh, absolutely. So, we already have the Democrats are continuing to maintain that they will not use this very complicated procedure called reconciliation, which is what the Republicans want them to do. They're digging their heels in and saying, absolutely not, we won't be going down that road in the next couple of months. At the same time, Mitch McConnell, even though he did concede, even though he offered this concession yesterday and again today, he did it in a pretty backhanded way. He offered the concession on the Senate floor and then immediately followed that up by bashing Democrats and blaming them for the mess that we find ourselves in.
The last time we spoke, Lauren, we talked about a third strand, which is a complex and at least two-part infrastructure, social improvement measure package that the Biden administration wants to get through. We talked a bit about bipartisanship. We talked also a bit about internal fighting with progressives within the Democratic Party wanting much more from Mr. Biden. Where are we with those strands?
Well, so in that case, the infighting within the Democratic Party continues. This is still very much an intra-Democratic Party issue, although there has been some progress. There seems to be a widespread understanding now when it comes to the White House, when it comes to those progressives in the House of Representatives, as well as some of the members of the Senate, that ultimately that bigger social investment package, which originally had a price tag of $3.5 trillion. There's a widespread consensus now that that number will have to come down. That package will have to shrink, and that will be in order to satisfy the demands of a handful of very powerful moderates within the party. There are two senators in particular, Joe Manchin from West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona. They wield a lot of power because the Senate, the Democrats control that with that 50-50 split. So any one senator could throw a wrench in the plan. But there is an expectation, like I said, that this package will shrink. The question now is by how much and what will have to be cut. So there's a very robust debate happening already, and you can expect it to continue throughout the month about what policy proposals and ambitions that the White House has will ultimately be left on the cutting room floor.
Thanks to Lauren Feder of the FT in Washington. Well, there was a pretty rapid response from the US markets, as I heard a short while ago from Kerry Leahy at Decision Economics. He's been tracking developments in New York.
Well, I think the day for the marketplace has been good. The market averages were up as much as a percentage point plus and then ended a little below that with probably some profit taking at the end of the day before the key jobs report tomorrow. But while we can talk about the political dimension of the debt ceiling or limitation, the fact that it could have extraordinarily adverse economic repercussions, and we're already having some mild adverse repercussions, is you getting into the technical business of financing positions over the period that the government might default. It was a lot more expensive for as much as, I guess, about a quarter of a percentage point to do that borrowing. That's not a big deal, but it just shows you that the possibility of the still world's largest economy defaulting on its debt, if even for a day or so, would have been climactic.
Should listeners outside America have cared about it if they hadn't reached this deal?
Not really. This is referred to from the Middle Ages as kind of a hair shirt situation, that each party out of power wants to put on a hair shirt and complain about all the horrible things that the other party has done to give us this huge debt situation. And one of the reasons why there is a problem right now is that the Democrats want something the Republicans still aren't ready to give them. They're willing to give them a deal, but only if they attach a number to the deal. If you had a debt ceiling suspension, you wouldn't have to talk about how big it is. And that's what Trump got. So the Democrats understandably are thinking, well, why can't Biden get what Trump got? And the Republicans say, we're willing to go along with you, but you got to tag a number to it so we can still use some political hay off of the fact that we're letting it get done, and it will get done. But I think from day to day, very few investors should worry about it unless they were unlucky enough to have some financing done on the day the government might actually default.
Well, thanks as always to Kerry Leahy in New York. You're with World Business Report. The world of football is coming to terms with a huge and controversial takeover. A consortium backed by Saudi Arabia will buy the English football club Newcastle United for about $400 million. Activists have for months been urging the English Premier League to focus on human rights issues, arguing that Saudi Arabia is trying to divert attention from its poor record in this respect. I've been talking to Miguel Delaney, who's chief football writer on The Independent.
My own view is that football has been for too long far too laissez-faire about ownership, be that in relation to billionaires, venture capitalists, or ultimately states. But when states are using clubs as political projects, it is an extreme. I mean, my view would always be that the preference should be that clubs are in control of fans and some sort of fan-led groups, as has happened with Hearts in Edinburgh. And this is really the total opposite of that. The argument is that it's the Public Investment Fund, that it's not the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But as basically any expert in the field will tell you, there is no separation. It's a sovereign investment fund in an absolute monarchy. And it ultimately means that Newcastle is being used as a political project for one of the most questionable states in the world.
How many other examples, Miguel, are there of states, whether through a sovereign wealth fund or otherwise, owning a footy club?
Newcastle are now one of three primary examples, and it's interesting they all come from the recent Gulf blockade between Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So Abu Dhabi, they obviously own Manchester City. That was initially done through Sheikh Mansour, although he's obviously a prominent member of the royal family in another absolute monarchy. The other is Qatar, who own Paris Saint-Germain through QSI, and now Newcastle. Now, there are, to be fair, various other questions about, say, where Chinese companies own stakes in clubs and given the amount of separation between state and some companies. So the questions now come up recently with Inter Milan. But the three most prominent examples now are Manchester City, Paris Saint-Germain, and now Newcastle United.
I want to play you a quick extract, if you don't mind, Miguel. This is Charlotte Robson. She's from the Newcastle United Supporters Trust.
The last 14 years under Mike Ashley have just been horrible as a fan. There's been no investment in the club. If you visited St James's Park, you would see that it's falling apart. There's wires coming out the wall. There's places where TVs obviously used to be. It needs painting. It needs a new roof.
Why do you think fans don't share your reservation?
It could be argued they're just not concentrating on the issues thrown up by Saudi Arabia enough. And I do think if people familiarise themselves with what exactly this means, if you listen to some of the stories from families who have been victimised by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and this regime, then people would change their mind pretty quickly, and they would realise that the problems that come from Mike Ashley's ownership, even though, yes, they are understandably bad in football context, but in contrast to real world problems, they are really kind of irrelevant.
Miguel, I mentioned the price tag, $400 million, we think. Is that money well spent from a Saudi perspective? As
investments, yes, I do think so. Unless there's any sort of developments like a Super League, the reality is that the Premier League is the only place to invest in football at the moment. I mean, I've been talking to people along those lines who have looked to invest in clubs in Italy, in other European countries, and the line constantly back is that the Premier League is really where it's at. You only have to look at the example of Leeds United. Through promotion now, they suddenly have a completely different international profile. And of course, it's essentially been the thrust of Mike Ashley's model in ownership of the club, which is basically just keeping them in the Premier League because of how wealthy the Premier League is. The club became self-sustainable along those lines. And now, of course, the big fair question from Newcastle fans through all of that was that they could have been investing more. But it does just point to the financial power of the Premier League. And from that perspective, yes, it is a sound financial investment.
Our thanks to Miguel Delaney, Chief Football Writer on The Independent. And that's it for this edition of World Business Report. Thanks to you for listening. Thanks to our production team in London, Russell and Miguel in the studio.